Hello, everybody.
Ok, grazie.
We are waiting a couple of minutes to make sure that everybody join.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Sorry, I was muted. I think we can start the meeting. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second day of our event, Youth and Communities for Climate Challenges. As I did yesterday, I will just repeat few things, as while here we are all participants, so we are kind of aware of what's going on in the background of this project. There might be people joining us in streaming, so we don't know really who is attending this event. So I just need to make a short introduction. So this event is coordinated by ILAUD, the International Laboratory of Architecture and Urban Design. And it is part of the initiatives All for Climate Italy 2021, Youth for Climate in particular, in preparation of the United Nations Climate Change Conference that will be held in the pre-COP in Milan in the next days, and then COP26 in Glasgow in November. Now, the overarching aim of this series of initiatives is to present a concrete proposal to tackle climate change. And however, we, as a group of participants in our specific project, we have focused on the potential role of and the potential interaction between university students and the local urban and rural communities, given our background mainly in architecture, urban design, planning, but also broadly speaking, with an interest in policies, environment, culture, and so on. So with quite a wide range of interest. And what we did, we have asked our partner universities around the world, literally from every continent, to produce some evidence of work done by students. So it's a really student-led work with different communities in a number of countries, as I said, and also to produce short videos that are all uploaded in the eLoud website, and they will remain there available to be watched even after this event. And we have now featured really a number of videos. I guess we got 13 from USA, Mexico, from Brazil, South Africa, the UK, Germany, Italy, Israel, Russia, India, Japan, and New Zealand. Quite an excellent coverage of different parts of the world. Thanks everyone for doing that. And really, I would say that by watching all of this together, we did yesterday. And of course, I invite you to do it. You really get the sense that there is a sort of urgency of the problem that is in a way understood and interpreted in different way in different parts of the world with different nuances. And I think this is the real element that is interesting here. So how we cope with a global challenge with a number of different tools, instruments, way of understanding. And this could probably be a condition for getting to more sustainable solutions. Now, I'm gonna share now some slides, particularly to highlight the program of the day, and then a few considerations about the sort of some preliminary result of this reflection. Allow me to share the screen. Can you see? Yeah, I guess you can see it.
Yeah.
So the program is the one that you can see now. So the afternoon will be really split in 3 parts. This introduction that I'm doing, and I will share this with Pilar Guerrieri from eLoud as well, with some preliminary findings and also reporting back from the sessions that we had yesterday. Then a series of what we called global contributions. We line up some speakers. Professor Takashi Ariga from the Department of Architecture is Dean of the Graduate School of Science and Engineering at Waseda University in Tokyo, Japan. And then Professor Christian Muniz, sorry, Dean of the School of Architecture and Urbanism at the Scuola da Cidade, Sao Paulo, Brazil. Professor Zo Sirai, UNESCO Chair, Cultural Policy and Cultural Planning, also Executive Dean of the Faculty of the Arts at Tshwane University of Technology, Pretoria, South Africa, and also Professor Dan Price from the Faculty of Architecture and Town Planning, Technion, Israel Institute of Technology. So we have, again, here a number of speakers from really different parts of the world. This should allow us to then have some comments, a Q&A session afterwards, and also open the floor later on to what we call the Students Forum. So if students are here present, and Linda Zardo also from eLoud and UAV Venice will moderate this part before we come to the conclusion where Professor Paolo Ceccarelli, which is here with us, is president of eLoud and again, UNESCO chair and emeritus professor from the University of Ferrara, will close the meeting with some remarks and a follow-up for future activities. Now, just give me a few minutes to say how we started. Apart from the fact that when we started it and when we submitted the proposal, we were all in lockdown, not really sort of thinking whether it would have been possible to propose a work between students and communities, because there was not even the possibility of interacting at that time with people. But instead, what we foresee at that time was actually finally possible to do it. And the idea and the hypothesis that we wanted in a way to develop was somehow started from a consideration of the need to do real practice-based teaching to sort of understand the real world problems, and the university were somehow are in need to do that more and more. But also another consideration was the fact that most of the time these experiences might be in a way, especially in architecture, in urban planning, in urban programs, where this is quite common in a way, they might be driven by specific agendas, might be driven by sectorial interest or opportunistic interest in a way. We wanted instead to explore the interaction of students with local communities, with their real contradictory problems and also possibly looking at vulnerable, marginal communities. We were also, in a way, our thoughts were also immersed in the period of the pandemic. I mean, which is in a way we are just now somehow phasing out, but that reminded us how much the pandemic had in his effect in actually mostly the vulnerables and creating larger inequality. And so if the purpose of COP26 in Glasgow is really to reflect about the green recovery, then we need to be sure that this can be in a way really inclusive if we are not going to miss the opportunity of the post-pandemic recovery. So these are the considerations that where we started thinking about this project, and we propose to our partners to, with all your, sort of volunteer activity and work, to prepare videos and to share what they are doing in we are doing in our universities. Now, just yesterday, in a way in support of our hypothesis and our work, Greta, the famous Greta Thunberg, in presenting her and sharing her thoughts with the high-level officials at the Youth for Climate Forum. Also here you can see from the picture in front of the mayor of Milan. She said, and you can find her speech in YouTube or her Twitter account. It's quite interesting to hear. I picked up a couple of sentences that I would like to repeat. I mean, not of course the fact that nothing has been done so far. I mean, because in a way probably it's true, but just a couple of things that are in line with what we are probably discussing today. She said, you cannot solve a crisis that you don't fully understand. And as long as we ignore equity and historic emissions, we won't get anywhere. And the second part that I picked up and I just transcribed here, and the climate crisis is a symptom of a much larger crisis, the sustainability crisis, the social crisis, a crisis of inequality that dates back to colonialism and beyond, a crisis based on the idea that some people are worth more than others and therefore have the rights to exploit and steal other people's lands and resources. And it is very naive to believe that we can solve this crisis without confronting the roots of it. So I think that we were trying to suggest to work with community really to confront the roots of the problem of climate crisis and understand where this comes from, who is affected, and so on. We also ask all our friends, participants to self-reflect, to reflect back on this experience, and to allow us to create a position paper in a way. And one of the ideas that comes up as a result is the fact that this interaction between students and communities is not only, and here is reported the sentence from the position paper, an eye-opening experience towards the complexity of the reality, but it helps to develop awareness, both from the point of view of students, but also from the point of view of communities, and also explore different cultural nuances of people and places. Being a real learning by doing process, it is key to understand what does it mean, the bottom-up approach, how to develop critical thinking, and also to being able to develop possibly more flexible, holistic solutions to architectural and urban problems. So in a way, it is something that can really enrich and inform the future professional practice of every student. There are 4 points that we made in the position paper, the kind of broad educational benefits of this exercise to sort of produce on-the-ground solutions, ideas beyond just academic speculation, beyond conventional disciplinary methods and boundary, the role of the university in itself, that is about, it can be about an experimental platform to facilitate this exchange with non-academic stakeholders and so on, and providing knowledge, skills to engage with communities, to practicing interdisciplinarity. And finally, the idea of networking, which is in a way what we have done here with this network, and also what we would like to do in the future with it, possibly with other people, with other universities, and also with with governments, with local governments, and also international organizations, is exploring confronting ideas, exploring ideas, and advocate for developing agendas. And the points for discussion are three. One is about the learning innovation, but also probably the two most important are the learning from the communities and the learning from different places. And the final question that I asked to all the contributors is, what are the priorities and the urban and architectural problems around the climate emergency that you think is important to address in your specific regional context to build this common agenda and to move forward? Now, these are the is the background, is the position paper, and now I think we can start getting a little bit more of information about the videos, and I would like to ask Pilar Guerreri to tell us a little bit about about the videos, about what we did yesterday, to start getting some material for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Giulio, and good afternoon to everybody. Just to recap, yesterday we had in the morning a session that was displaying in the morning the videos of New Zealand, Japan, and UK, together with those who had actually contributed actively to make the videos. And in the afternoon, we displayed India, Mexico, and Germany. So this was the program of yesterday. Obviously, we were short of time, so we were not able to see the videos. But as Giulio mentioned before, all the videos are now available online and on our website. So I think they're all worth having a look. So I'm going to just give you a little summary of the different videos. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to summarize them all, but I think that I'm going to share some of the insight from each video and then share with you the common topics that I find there are. So each video is focusing on a different context, and most of them a different relationship with each community and a different relationship with each environment. But somehow, even if the contexts are so different, there are certain problems, certain questions that arise by looking them all that are a common problem and issues. So if Giulio goes on with the slide, I think I could start by speaking a little bit about these four. So New Zealand video was incredibly inspiring. It is a video that was focusing on the northern part of New Zealand, which is actually a part that is one of the most vulnerable affected by climate change, sea level rising and storm surge. So in the video, they have been analyzing the effects on communities and been analyzing how local communities and indigenous communities had some indigenous ecological knowledge and nature-based solution to actually face these climate change challenges. So I think it is pretty interesting, the kind of solution and relationship that was established between environment and local communities. For what Japan is concerned, the video is actually focusing on risk mitigation, climate risk mitigation, disaster risk mitigation plans with local communities and empowerment. So disaster, both natural and urban. I mean, I think the video was pretty thoughtful. It was saying that natural disaster somehow ended up as even urban disaster. So the two things are pretty much connected. So these disasters that increased, obviously, due to climate change, and among these disasters, we can mention water supply, sewage, evacuation sites, have not been sufficiently developed. And the video shows how, with community engagement, this could be better improved. So again, the issues can be tackled in a better manner together with the relationship with local communities and local engagement. Mexico also, I believe it was a very inspiring video. It was focusing more on marginal and vulnerable communities of Mexico. Obviously, climate change and environmental changes affects everybody, but affects majorly those communities that are more vulnerable, that has less means because they are less capable of protecting themselves. And the Mexican university has been enhancing the role of the architect in making these communities more sustainable. So they have been focusing on a specific project designed for vulnerable that occurred at the beginning of this year, and a project that was involving different types of communities and the valuable relationship that was there between the students, the architects, and the local communities. So I think the university here have played a pretty interesting role. For what India is concerned, the video was analyzing one specific neighborhood of Delhi, Interlock, and the relationship between empty spaces and nature in the neighborhood, and how this relationship between empty spaces and public spaces and nature has been over the year strongly compromised due to the urbanization processes, and how the empty spaces have become an issue. They have become urban trash, and there has been the perishing of urban water bodies, and there has been more and more lack of nature and relationship with nature. So, and somehow the relationship with nature has not been a strategy enough, an urban strategy, and nature has not become not enough part of the identity of the neighborhood. So I think these 4 videos were pretty interesting. There are some more. USA video. It's actually showing different interesting perspective on the relationship with nature by looking at communities. So there are a series of examples of healthy integration between human and nature in Hawaii. So non-impactant, for example, agricultural practices or sustainable fish farming technologies. So somehow relationship between agriculture and indigenous communities. So somehow it reversed the perspective and give us the possibility to look at indigenous ways of interacting with nature in a valuable manner. For what Germany is concerned, again, here we are focusing on one particular neighborhood in Berlin, and a series of sustainable concepts that are used to improve the area. So sustainable, I think someone. So sustainable urban renewal examples such as the participation of local communities in the area, the usage of public space, living lab for sustainable mobility or social infrastructure. So an analysis of urban regeneration of the whole area. So Russia, it's even different. It's focusing on natural reserve of Lake Baikal, which is in Siberia. And the project is especially focusing on the protection and the empowerment, improvement of a natural environment, so a natural reserve. And here there is a lot of focus on a series of actions that has been taken on the area for the development, for example, of tourist activities, on development of high quality architecture, networks, tracks, and so on. So it is very much focusing on one particular area. Israel, instead, the video show the work of the university. Here, the university is very much present, and the work that the university did with marginal communities and disadvantaged communities in the recovery, for example, of gardens and in the transformation of these gardens in community gardens, so invaluable meeting spaces for the area. So again, interesting the way India, Germany, and Israel have been working on neighborhoods, specific neighborhoods, and then the interaction with the community. UK, the video was focusing on a Westminster Climate Urbanism Studio that was focusing on River Lee, an area in London, and work that was hoping to tackle water pollution, river management, green spaces improvement, and obviously community activism and green gentrification. So a project that was actually focusing on one part of London and trying to revamp and reuse public spaces and the area of the river by also interacting and involving the local community. South Africa, a very interesting video focusing on two South African big challenges, which are water treatment and waste management. So poor wastewater treatment and the use, for example, of chemicals for this water treatment, and in general, we know the lack of water in South Africa have somehow had an impact, a terrible impact on human health and environment. So the video, it's actually trying to show some virtuous alternatives on how to manage this challenge in a much more sustainable manner. We have reached almost at the end. So the video of Brazil, it's another pretty interesting video that is showing 3 different examples around the country of different ways of enhancing traditional communities, traditional, for example, construction methods and solutions. So indigenous way of tackling climate change. So a little bit like the US video, they're trying to look at indigenous methodologies that can be that can inspire contemporary practice. So somehow sort of bottom-up strategies. For what Italy is concerned, the videos were 2, one coming from Politecnico di Milano and the other one coming from the University of Florence. Both were focusing on, we have sort of clubbed them together because both were focusing on the neighborhood of Dergano in Milan, and focusing on the work done by these 2 institutions on the area, together also with ILAUD, a sort of direct collaboration with marginal communities. Even here during the summer, Politecnico di Milano and ILAUD has taken forward a workshop where we had been engaging directly the local marginal communities to find not really to find solution, but to discuss problems and imagine solution or ideas for the future. And these marginal communities were younger and elderly people, migrants and temporary workers. So, and how pandemic somehow affected these neighborhood. So I think that all these videos were pretty much very interesting, each focusing, some focusing on much general issues, some others focusing on specific areas. But I think from more or less every video came out the importance of looking at solution bottom up and the importance of the engagement of the local community in trying to imagine more specific and better solution and sustainable solution for each place and context. So Giulio, I don't know if you want to add some remarks on this, but
yeah, no, thanks, Pilar. No, I think it's it's perfectly fine. I think I can now can stop the sharing of this of the PowerPoint. I mean, I think it does quite get the sense of, again, of the variety of different experiences, and this first attempt to pick up some and to highlight some keywords, some cross-cutting themes across the whole work in a way. So now that we don't have anymore the PowerPoint and we are more sort of entering into a discussion and having some comments from our guests, it's really time to start thinking about how we can develop further ideas for moving on, let's say. And so the sense of this for intervention is really to start having this discussion a bit beyond the project in itself. So we have invited 4 speakers, as I said earlier. Sorry, I am, and I would like to invite, unless there are questions at the moment, but I think we can keep probably our questions and comments for the discussion. So I would probably prefer to start with the Professor Takashi Ariga from Waseda University, that is quite late in the night, actually, in Japan. Thanks for staying with us and share your thoughts.
Thank you, Giulio. Thank you for your sharing this quite inspiring event. Yes, I really appreciate it. Well, I haven't, of course, I haven't prepared any formal presentation at this moment, though. As for some comments related to the point you have presented earlier today, what I have learned from 2 video presentations yesterday. One is done by New Zealand, the fellow students, and the other one composed by the UK. Both were quite important in terms of what we have learned from communities. And one of the most inspiring things was including Japanese video, in fact, but all 3 of the video presentations pointed out and that highlighted the importance of the local wisdoms. In other words, the New Zealand video used the word of indigenous knowledge. And the UK's video also mentioned the importance of the citizens' science in the context of the Rivalry project. And the Japanese students pointed out the local wisdoms. I mean, all of those 3 keywords are deeply related to what we can learn in collaboration with the ordinary citizens in the communities about the re-evaluating the existed urban stocks or building stocks in order to functionally or spatially making the most of their stock values, and then to convert it to the future. I mean, to meet the future needs. And in this case, climate change related disasters or abandoned properties or declining aesthetic qualities of the cityscapes and so on, so on, so on. So it's very important for us to really develop the innovative planning and designing approaches which are capable of finding or digging up those local wisdoms and then understanding the contemporary values of those local wisdoms, and then to make the most of those meanings for the purpose of enhancing the existed urban environment in relation to the climate change risks or whatever maybe in the case of Tokyo also, in order to meet with the needs to the unforeseeable disasters as well. So that's my first comment related to the point 2 you have mentioned. Yes, yeah, thank you. That's my first comment.
Thank you very much, Takashi, and thanks for highlighting this point, particularly because it comes from the experience that we have also read in your comments on the position paper, about the position paper regarding the particular way of engaging with communities in the context of Japan. That, of course, it's so that probably would suggest also different ways not to then get engaged with the communities in different parts of the world. So this probably would suggest, as I said, further inquiry, into how we can get that, or how we can innovate our practice by knowing what has been done in other contexts. I also found inspirational it was a bit of a random selection of videos, but the 3 yesterday morning were quite inspiring from that point of view. Thank you very much for this. We'll come back to this point later, and I think we should have. I don't see Christine Munitz in the panel. Sorry, in the room. Probably she has got some problems in connection, but maybe we can, for now, we can move to Mzo Sirai for his also remarks and comments. Mzo Sirai from Chuan University of Technology. We didn't have the chance to actually to show your video, but I know that you have also some slides if you want to show though for sharing some insights from South Africa as well.
Thanks, Kilio. Perhaps can I share my screen?
Yeah, sure. Take your time to do it. We cannot see you, by the way.
You will see me shortly.
Okay, that's good.
I make you co-host, so you should be able to share it now.
Is it visible?
Yes.
Right.
It's been, yeah, I started.
Right, let me.
Yeah.
You
perfect.
can see me now.
Oh yeah, we can also see you. Good, great.
Thanks, Gideon. Perhaps let me start by a way of disclaimer. Firstly, we have just decided to co-present these thoughts with my student, Kukunyoni, who is doing masters with the university. This is his area of actual interest, and therefore is going to assist me. Secondly, just a disclaimer. Yes, I was the dean of, for many years, of the Faculty of the Arts, but my tenure ended a long time ago here.
Sorry for that. So.
And also my chairmanship for UNESCO has just ended. And therefore I'm no longer working for the university. However, I am involved in research projects, working closely with the government and also with the university. Now, for instance, we are just finalizing a contract of the project that we are going to run in one of the provinces in South Africa, with a view to pilot a indigenous knowledge-led smart village. So I'm still involved in research. I felt that I should make that disclaimer so that I am not viewed as being unethical. Now, coming to our presentation, there are some few thoughts that we wanted to share with you based on our South African experience, and also based on what we've been doing with Gideon in the area of climate change and culture. We have the view that there is a direction that, especially in our context, that we need to take in order to ensure that the question of climate change is addressed. In South Africa, for instance, policymakers and some academics and other stakeholders, we are very much obsessed with the whole notion of developing smart cities, which is a new concept. This concept is a concept, in our view, that has been stolen from the West without taking into account our context in South Africa. It has become a buzzword. However, South Africa is silent on the question of the smart village concept, a concept which originated in Africa, Central America, and also Asia, and back to the middle of the last decade. We don't know why this obsession about smart cities without taking into account the question of smart village. there is a view that from Manza that for us to make efforts towards making cities smart or climate resilient, we need to look first at making our villages smart, premised on indigenous knowledge. The success of smart cities lies in making our villages smart first before we can begin the process of the smart city. Yes, I'm aware that is basing his argument on his Indian, if you like, experience, but I think his view is also applicable to our South African situation. We're of the view that we cannot move very fast or in terms of developing smart cities and living out the villages where vulnerable people are. Now, in South Africa, this is a situation where 60% people are living in urban areas and 39% people are living in rural areas. You can see from this that there is a huge movement, or rather exodus, from the urban areas from rural areas to urban areas. Obviously, if you look at this is going to have a serious implications in terms of the environment, and therefore is something that I think as a country we need to think about and try strategies to address it. Now, these are some of the priorities if you read our policy on climate change. In fact, we've got about 10 priorities, but I've just highlighted these. The question of risk reduction coming up with policies that are intended to address the immediate threats to economy, ecosystems, and so on. The question of sector responses. The question is in other words, the question is how the key sectors and organizations are responding to the climate crisis in South Africa. In fact, these key sectors organizations are required to ensure that they prepare, submit, and implement their reports and submit them to the offices that are responsible for climate change. Also, the question of integrated policies that I think in a planning process, which prioritizes the mainstreaming of climate change considerations and responses into all relevant sectors, and at a provincial level, national level, as well as the local government level. These are some of the challenges that we're having. The question of rural and urban divide as opposed to sustainable development is something that we were not dealing with. It's a serious challenge in South Africa. We have the view that this challenge has to be addressed because it does affect the environment. Question of water, somebody has mentioned that South Africa is a scarce water country. The question of floods and fires that are destroying many poor communities. One of the challenges, the question of more than 20 years into democracy, we are still obsessed with the Eurocentric planning approaches. And this planning approach is actually responsible to some extent for climate crisis in South Africa. One of the challenges, for instance, in South Africa is the question of both top-down planning approach, which tends to marginalize indigenous communities and their knowledge, as opposed to what some presenters have referred to as community-based strategies. That's a serious challenge in South Africa. And if you look at our cities and townships, these townships, they reflect planning that is really that was conceived long time ago in South Africa before. I mean, now I think many years into democracy. As soon as the colonizers came into South Africa, these bending approaches we're still using them. Now, and therefore we are saying these are the things that I think we need to look into. Now, the question of really cities and dense urban settlements, which consume large amounts of energy. For instance, in South Africa, we talk of load shedding, and now and again, energy is a challenge, especially for the poor, communities. One of the challenges, of course, is the absence, of linkage between climate change and indigenous knowledge, with the view to mitigate for mitigation and adaptation, strategies. That's a serious challenge. I don't know why, as a country, we tended to marginalize our cultures or indigenous cultures, if you like. Go over to your young man.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and Prof there. Can I perhaps share my screen as well?
Yes, I think, do you have you can't see the sharing option?
No, I do have it. Let me share the screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right. I hope everything is clear. Okay.
Very clear.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Thank you. So I'm just going to take over from where Prof just ended, just extending a bit the theme of socioeconomic challenges that South Africa is facing. The issue of spatial inequality, for example, is a very problematic scenario for South Africa. So the inequality can be actually characterized in ways that indicate these crucial linkages between how we are managing the environment and how we are running the economy and how we are trying to address, poverty, inequality, and unemployment without blowing the fuses of the planet. So South Africa has topped the charts as one of the most unequal societies in the world. And what is disturbing with that trend is that the inequality seems to be widening since 1994, the year in which South Africa obtained its independence from the apartheid regime, signifying that we are not doing well in as far as meeting our goals for welfare and transformation are concerned. So when you look at the problem of inequality, it takes about 3 dimensions. The first dimension is that it is raised. In other words, you have the wealth and income concentrated in the white demographic, and then you've got less wealth and income with the non-white demographics. So there's that racial dimension to it, and then there's also a gender dimension to it. You have more wealth and income on the males than you have on the females. And then the other interesting one, which is very close to the theme of indigenous knowledge systems and how that can be tapped to alleviate the threat of climate variability, is the dimension of spatial inequality, what is also referred to as the green apartheid in other contexts. So the picture that you see here is a sobering summary of how South Africa looks like, from a human settlement point of view, socioeconomic point of view, political point of view. You have a shanty settlement, shanty informal settlement on the other side, highly congested. And then on the other side, you have sports facility, a sharp contrast of what is happening. So this is a very common scene across the country. So the inequality on that dimension is such that populations that live in higher living measure standards, settlements have more income and wealth as opposed to populations that dwell in low living standard measure settlements. So you have that inequality that takes those three dimensions: race, gender, and spatial planning or space. So all this is evidence of the failures of pretty much Eurocentric approaches to a lot of issues, socioeconomic issues, but more precisely Eurocentric approaches to human settlements and rural-urban planning and development. So the point we are arguing here is that any innovation or any sort of development that privileges one sector of the society and prejudices or leaves out another sector is not sustainable. So as we saw during the unrest that were taking place in South Africa in the month of July, there are many dynamics to it, but by and large, what is the driving force in the background of all those upheavals is this very scenario that you're looking at. You have people that are extremely wealthy on the other end and people that are extremely poor on the other end. And therefore, what we are positing here.
Gugu, can I ask just 1 minute, okay?
Okay, Prof.
Thank you. Sorry, you want to conclude? No, I didn't meant to stop. I did just to say that 1 minute to go.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Sorry.
that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I've made the major points. Let me just sum up the major issue that we want to put forward. So this picture is taken from one of the small towns in South Africa. It speaks of the dilapidation that we're experiencing, again, referencing the issue of unsustainable approaches to rural and urban development. And this is the solution inspired from the premise of indigenous knowledge systems to approach development, transformation from a sustainable point of view. So what you are seeing here is a model of a mixed use, multi-purpose, smart rural village that has a lot of facilities, as you can see listed there from number 1 to 15. But the gist of that being, this is one approach that is going to be viable in alleviating the main problem of rural to urban migration. Research shows that the grim impacts of climate change are going to leave rural communities even poorer than they are currently, due to the global warming and young people particularly moving to the urban areas looking for better opportunities. So without an approach like this, South Africa will struggle to position itself to meet its own national targets and the international targets for sustainability. I will end this one here. Thank you.
Thanks, Gugu. Sorry for closing. For asking to get to a conclusion, and especially with Zoom, it's not easy to moderate. That sounds a bit rude, but so forgive me for that. But the presentation from both Zosirai and Gugugnoni, I think is extremely interesting for a number of reasons. The latest point, of course, about this combination intricacies of the sort of green apartheid issues with the racial dimension, the gender dimension, no, of the approaches that have been sort of implemented in the context of South Africa, which, by the way, in different ways, it reminds what actually is happening increasingly also in global North cities, because I mean, one part of the discussion we are having here in the context of, for instance, East London is about all these sort of interrelated issues and rising inequality within cities in certain areas, especially, of course, not at the level of South Africa. And the other aspect, which reminds me of various discussion of what's going on, for instance, in other parts of Africa, in North Africa, with all this discourse of smart cities, which tend to be often paired with this green cities, smart cities as a solution for most problems, tends to instead hide, again, promise of inequality, creation of cities from scratch, which are water consuming. I'm thinking about the context of Morocco, where I'm more familiar with. So there is an old problem here about discourses which tend to become sort of important from even to tackle climate change issues in a certain way, but instead they're hiding other agendas, and they are in risk of reproducing inequality and actually not solving climate problems at all. Anyway, this is again something for discussion. Before I go to dump price, I don't know if Takashi, did you want to share a document with us, or do you want to add something, because I might miss something from the chat, or we can share the document.
Oh yes. Well, I have just uploaded a very small document file which contains some of the brief comments in response to the video presentation yesterday, and also in response to the position papers which you have shared with us. So, but I wouldn't mean to, get in detail about that memorandum now. So just take a look in later as a reference for the further examination, further discussions. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So we take that in consideration as well, and now we can move to Dan Price from Israel for your also remarks about that. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, and thank you.
And congratulations also for what you said yesterday about that you just became a grandfather. Am I right?
Absolutely. And thank you to all of the people who organized this meeting, the videos. I apologize for the misunderstandings that there were. I also apologize that the videos that we sent were really meant to be 3 separate videos, which have now been combined together into a very long video, 24 minutes. I hope some of you at least will have the patience to go through them. And I looked at all the videos, and the variety of challenges and the variety of strategies is really impressive. And I think that I want to compliment the organizers for having exposed us to the richness of approaches that different universities are taking. Our university, at least the program that I run, really focuses on a design build, in that the pedagogic strategy is to try to get students to go through the entire process, from meeting with clients, meeting with the community, understanding their problems, understanding the challenges, learning about their skills and about their uniqueness, and then designing together, which in itself, for those who are involved in architectural schools will know how difficult it is to get architectural students to design projects together as opposed to individual projects, and then present them to the community. And then after they come to an arranged plan, they have to submit an application for a building permit, working drawings, details, bill of quantities, and then finally to actually build the building. So it's a very detailed and very long and very involved process. But I want to respond to the questions that you posed in your first slide, and I'm going to try to do them in the reverse order. You asked about our regional focuses. Well, Israel is a very small country. It is one of the most densely populated countries in the world, and the population is growing as opposed to the European countries where the population is reducing. Israel's population is still increasing, and it is a huge challenge to maintain the quality green spaces. So part of the issue for us is intensifying the building inside the cities. And watching the videos, for example, from Mexico, it was just I was jealous of the land that's available for these communities to build. We have to build in very dense and very focused communities. The second challenge, apart from the shortage of land, the cultural diversity of the country. Unfortunately, the demographics of Israel are very divided, and people have got little contact between communities. So between the Arab community, the Jewish community, the Druze, the Cherkessim, even within those communities, between the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, for example, and the secular Jewish community, there is a huge divide, cultural divide, and there is not a huge amount of contact. And one of the advantages that we can leverage as a university is by taking our students and taking them into these communities and working with them. And the exposure of the students to alternative communities is a learning experience in itself. I also should point out that it's a learning experience in two directions. Because, for example, in one of the videos which you may view is a bike riding club which we built in the city of Lod, which is a very poor community, predominantly Arab, Muslim Arab. And the communities there, if I was to look at the statistic, I think that 5% of the of these kids who finish school actually go to universities, as opposed to other communities where there's something like 60% of the population go to university. Now, when we take students from a university to go and actually build in those communities, the youth in that community suddenly get exposed, sometimes for the first time in their lives, to students at a university. And they come and they build with them. And they learn of the potential of higher education. They suddenly have role models, which we follow up afterwards. We ask the students to stay in contact with the kids they met in those communities. And there have been tremendous results. So the learning is in two directions, that the students, our students from the universities, will learn about those communities, learn from the communities, as the previous speakers were talking about, the local indigenous knowledge, about the local materials, the recycled materials, the limitations, and exposed to the lifestyles of those people. And at the same time, the local community have an opportunity to come into contact with students and graduate students and learn about what they can offer and what the potential of higher education is for them. I would say one other thing about the first question you asked about the learning evaluation. Here, we have fallen short, and this is self-criticism. We are trying to find graduate students who could follow up with the projects that we've built inside the communities and see to what extent we've actually influenced on a long-term, on sustainable level. We've actually influenced the activities inside that community. We have anecdotal evidence. For example, in May, there was rioting in Israel between different communities. And in the particular town of Lod that you'll see in one of the videos, the buildings on both sides of the bike riding club that we built were burnt by the local youth. But they took care to protect the building which they had built, which in itself is evidence of the impact that working with communities and building with communities has. I think I'll end it there. I think that we'll be running out of time. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you very much. It's absolutely extremely really interesting to hear from the experience of Israel, because it's very true that it's so particular, and for what you have explained, that it's another angle, let's say, by which we can see these problems. And by the way, the point you made about the mutual learning, I think this is absolutely important. It is something that was actually, I'm thinking about the experience of historically of London, no, where graduates from Cambridge and Oxford would go to East London in reality, not to work with people that were completely uneducated, and that was a mutual learning, a model in a way to follow, and then to gain also from this experience. And this is something we are losing, and instead we need to sort of trying to get it back, not to our programs, that in terms of learning innovation. So thanks everyone for this really different insights from very different contexts. I think now it's we can possibly take some questions, or maybe if someone want to add further comments. I think we have some time to do so, and then I'll and also students, but then I will ask Linda to do so. So is there any question? I know the Zoom doesn't really allow a wonderful interaction as we could have in a physical environment, but just unmute yourself in case we are not a lot. So if you want to ask some question or make some comments. Or type in the chat, we can also pick up that if you want. Or if there's at the moment no question, yeah, a comment from, yeah, Google, please.
Okay, thanks, Prof. Giulio. I just want to make a short comment with regards to the issue of utilizing indigenous wisdom, indigenous knowledge systems in fighting the looming climate crisis. I think I had one of the speakers who was taking us through the videos mentioning the importance of tapping this indigenous wisdom in fighting climate change. And the reason why this is important is, and I think Prof. Giulio also mentioned it, to say we cannot solve a problem that we don't fully understand. So in most cases, we run with Eurocentric interpretations of what the problem is. And then when we've made that error in judgment, then we craft Eurocentric solutions to address Eurocentric problems, and that tends not to work, as we have seen, particularly in South Africa and other, examples across the world. There's this concept, I think the first time I actually heard of this concept was from Prof. Giulio, but I've actually come across it in various literature around eco-socialism, and multidisciplinary approaches to fighting the climate scourge and so forth. The concept of epistemicide, which is actually sort of the killing of other knowledge systems, particularly by the global north, such that you have a homogenized interpretation of what the problem is, and then you have a standardized, but in essence, a monopolized scenario where solutions must be crafted. And I think we really need to be intentional on our indigenous knowledge system, so that it can be proved, for example, in South Africa, that the settlements, the historical settlements that we had before apartheid and colonialism and so forth, were modeled around natural resources. People settled around, sufficient water resources like rivers and so forth. So you will discover that the indigenous communities in South Africa did not have as much the water problem that the modern South Africa has today. So I'm just making this point to say it's important to, we would need to go that far back in order to move forward. Thank you so much.
Thanks, thanks, Google. Excellent point. And it reminds the epistemic side of knowledge and the four diversities of cultures, which goes hand in hand with the loss of biodiversity, by the way, which is one of the other big, huge problems that we are facing. The two are somehow in parallel. Yeah, please, Dan. Unmute yourself.
Yeah. Okay. You know, Google, I really appreciate what you're saying, and I understand the point that's being made. We find I think that the problem is a little bit more complex. When we go and we talk with people, particularly the not the leaders, but with the people who live in some of the communities, we find that their aspirations are much more what you would call Eurocentric than we would like. And when we come to speak to some of the local communities and we suggest that we learn from local knowledge, their response to us is that they really want the kind of things that we don't want. You know, that they want to eat McDonald's when we're trying to tell them that they should be eating local food. That we tell them we can be building with your local materials. And they tell us, what local materials? We want concrete and steel buildings just like are built in your cities. And we find ourselves trying to do exactly what we thought we weren't doing. We're trying to educate them to respect their own traditions and their own culture and their own regional qualities. And sometimes that puts us in a cultural mess. Because we're coming from our cities in our homes built with Western technology, and we're coming to work with local communities who want the homes that we're living in, and not the homes that we think that they should be living in, and that they could be living in. And we see them aspiring to buying SUVs and having parking next to their homes and having a TV in every room. And we're trying to persuade them to leapfrog the mistakes that we've made. And it's not that easy.
Yeah, very interesting. Sorry, who is?
Mzo here.
Oh, yeah, Mzo, please.
Yes. I think the notion of perhaps culture-led development, if you like, in this knowledge-led development, it does not suggest that in these national systems must be romanticized. In other words, these cultures must come to the center and interact in the center. No culture must be imposed on each other. Secondly, the problem with the bottom-up approach, the moment you go to the community and you suggest what is good for the community, that becomes a problem. We need to ensure that as we move forward, we use asset-based development approach. People must decide as to which direction do they go. If they want television, there's nothing wrong with that. This is what they want. If they want Mercedes-Benz, that's what they want. What we cannot do, we cannot move other cultures to the center at the expense of others. In this case, in our view, we are saying charity should begin at home. Start with what you know. Start with your indigenous knowledge system and allow other systems to interact with the community, local, original, systems. So I think this is what Cook was saying in a nutshell.
Thanks, Mzo, and thanks also Dan for the comment. I think it's for sure this is about the complexity of communities, and it's something that we should probably further explore, because of course we might end up in so many different aspects to take into consideration that it's, as I said, worth highlighting that. Any other point or comments? Because it's, I think it would be also nice, I hear something, but yeah, it would be also nice to hear from the students, and so, and also from Linda, by the way, that in case you have a comment in general to frame that. Shall we just go straight to the part about, yeah, to this part? And in any case, if there are other comments, I think it's pretty informal now, the discussion.
Giulio, I just would like to add a brief comment that I think every experience has been incredibly inspiring. So from each context, we had grasped a different approach and certain common guidelines and ideas. So I would suggest those who have been participating to the session and who have been contributing with the video to maybe think forward a way to actually collaborate together. So imagine maybe a future project that can be done with eLoud and as a collaboration of the different institutions. So not just a display of your own work that has been done in loco, but maybe imagine the possibility of working actually together on a common project in the future. So maybe some videos or some studies, some research that can be done by making all us work together on certain common issues. So this is just a hope that each of us will think forward and imagine a further collaboration that will not just end today. I think that's very important.
Sure. Thanks, Pilar. Linda.
Well, yeah, thanks, Pilar. Thanks, Giulio, and thanks to all the guests that have been, raising their precious point of view today. Yeah, I would like to try to connect what I've been saying in this hour with possible questions and also comments or doubts coming from the students. I would like to start from what Gugu's mentioned, that was about global north and possible, let's say, measures or answers to climate change. And I think that is a big issue. And I'm thinking, because today we're also talking a little bit about like the role of universities and the academia. So what can the academia do, both putting together researchers, professors, students? And for sure, climate change adaptation is something that needs to be addressed at local level. No measure fits all. That is something that is kind of clear. But maybe these kind of discussions can help us to identify maybe a common vision or a common paradigm, which is not about having common solutions, but at least a shared understanding about some words to start with. For example, during the videos, going through them, it was, I mean, the word that was, for example, tradition was coming out often. And the point is, sure, when we talk about climate change innovation, we talk about development, urbanization, we often talk about innovation. And the problem is that it often happens that in many contexts, political contexts, but also in the university, when we talk about innovation, we think that we're talking about technology, which is not the same thing. So having a common understanding about the role of tradition within innovation can be key. And this is something that can be discussed together despite continents, despite the size of the human settlements we are dealing with. So what can be the best role of tradition within innovation without ending up having maybe traditional / outdated ways of analyzing and super technological answers that don't fit all contexts. Maybe it can work the other way around. So having technological analysis and measures that combine in an innovative way tradition. So we could discuss about this, and I'm sure that we can find some common understanding about these issues. I would like, as Julia was mentioning, to hear from, is there any question from the students also typing in the chat if there is any problem with the audio? And I have a question for them, which is also, I was wondering whether, well, anything in this process made you change your mind about something. So if there is something that you thought you knew in a specific way before your projects, your initiatives, and now you change your mind about it.
Specifically about the projects that we're doing?
Well, maybe even maybe the project was an input to change your mind about something that is.
I'll tell you the most, I think one of the most fundamental. I think that that over the last 3 years that we've been doing these projects, what we found was that the connection with local leadership was the most important factor in the selection of projects. Right now, the word has got out and people know of the projects that we are doing, and we're inundated by requests from different communities to come and work with them. And we're trying to get sponsorship in order to expand it. But the most critical link of the chain is having local leadership who will continue the work after we leave. That's the secret of making it sustainable. I think that with the one project, the first project which you show in the videos was a community garden. And immediately after we finished the community garden, the COVID pandemic hit Israel, and nobody came to the garden. It was abandoned. And the community that were running the garden before has completely disintegrated. And now we're trying to work with local leaders to reform it. But if we don't have people who will continue the work, who will be triggered by the involvement of the students, then it becomes less sustainable. So in all of the work that we're trying to do now, and I think that in many of the projects that we were looking at, I was particularly interested in the Mexican project of trying to find a way to do local, what they call self-construction with the recycled materials. Whether the students had taken whether there was any program where the students could actually go and work with the local community to teach people to build, and then, or to learn how to build from the local builders, and then that would continue and become a sustainable local industry. A little bit like the work of Francis Kéré in Burkina Faso, where he taught people to build schools. And then the same team of people who built the first school went to the next village and taught them to build a school. And before you turn around, half of the country has now got schools built by local people through this virtuous cycle of knowledge which was brought to the first community.
Thanks, Professor Price. I was muted, sorry. So my tank was going. Yeah, no, for sure, this is a key point, right? Also here in Venice, we are hosting the Biennale for Architecture during this month. And I went to visit the Iraqeni pavilion, for example. And there was a great example of working with communities and using the pilots to really transfer knowledge that then is staying there, right? Talking about sustainability and time. So there was the project was in the delta of a river, and it was about going back to traditional techniques for building boats, as the new boats are not sustainable for many of the fishermen there. And now that the people there initiating the project left, the things is going on its own feet, which is what really works. And actually, I also have another, I mean, thinking about this made me think about a question about time, because I think, at least when I was a student, this was my feeling, that sometimes you get disillusioned before starting a project because you're worried about the time that this may take to bring change. If you're talking about regreening a city, you're talking about, you say, okay, I'm a student, I can start, but probably I'll never see the real effects of this. But I think that for you guys who went to the field and interviews the people, I mean, at least when I was listening to your videos, I heard of cities changing in 2-3 decades. And so, and actually, if you want to, let's say, build a forest, I mean, I was involved in a project for reforesting an area. You can already see big changes in kind of 5 years. And of course, they still look kind of a long period, but you can think about what will happen in 5 years. So even though negative changes can occur quickly, also your positive changes can come kind of quickly. So I really hope that this, I saw Emanuele raised his hand. So maybe, please.
Yes, yeah, I just wanted to, first of all, reply maybe to the question that you just asked, what sort of reflection for what you learned from the video. And beside the fact also we try to, I mean, for our UK video, we try to involve, we actually involved all the students from a BA film and media module. So we try to share knowledge also within our university from other modules, and all the students that were actually very interested to participate and volunteer. I'm just thinking about the importance of, as Dan Price, Professor Dan Price mentioned before, and also Giulio, Professor Giulio, about the importance of sharing knowledge between students and communities. So how the climate issue can be tackled at the local level. And I think as us, as the students, we really have a power. That's the way to pursue our future. How we can activate a conversation with local communities at the same time they can understand what's our curricula. So having this kind of conversation between students and local communities. Also might be open up a question, what's the role at this point of the university? Try to not bypass the institutions, but activate, again, this kind of strong connection.
Thanks, Emanuele, for your intervention.
Anna?
If there is time, just a short remark. Thank you very much for putting together all those images of communities and educational practices. I was very impressed by seeing all them together. And I wanted just to point at one thing, that after our practices for the local context that I know, the one in Italy, in Bergamo, I was really impressed for the effects that they are not tangible effects for the moment, but really intangible. Because I think that the fact of giving voices and interacting with some people, some active people, at least in this part, is creating somehow a higher knowledge and understandings of their potentialities. So in this recent period, some part of this community that we discussed with during the workshop and so on is really rising and growing and asking something more, even at a political level. So I think that it would be very interesting to reflect on the, let's say, informal counterpart of our formal practices. So the educational practices focus on things, on themes, on objects, but we are also producing really important informal and intangible effects that should be monitored somehow. I don't know really how in the moment, but it could be a theme. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Linda, I'm just conscious about time now, so probably,
Yeah.
what do you think? Shall we
give the floor to Paolo?
Probably. Paolo, please, some final remarks, some way forwards. Over to you.
Okay, thank you to everybody, and I'm very, very glad to end this very interesting 2 days event that in some way we decided to participate in it because it was presented as an opportunity in Milano to discuss about some issues that were already in our agenda, and we thought it would have been a useful possibility for going further and in more detail in some of these issues and try to develop further connection among the different schools along very important lines of work as the one that climate change in some way is requesting now. I think that we made a good choice, and also we ran into troubles because obviously the issue we are facing are very, very difficult and important, and we have to be a very strong sense of responsibility in going on in this effort of improving education and even professional practice in a very crucial area of the future of our communities around the world. There are a couple of things that I found very interesting coming out from your talks and from the videos, and I think that are really suggesting that there is a need of changing a number of basic paradigms that we have in some way used in the last decades for basing our architectural debate and culture and research. The first one that came out, I think, in different ways, under the form of local wisdom or under the form of tradition that had helped the communities to develop in very different ways around the world their own environment and so on, came out the first suggestion that, and the first, so some way, we rediscovered that in some way we have lost in our educational work many times a connection with reality. So in some way, in many times the debate of architecture, the work done by the research on spatial planning, all these stories that are very important and have produced lots of books and essays and so, are many, many times or very frequently sort of a work based on self-reference. We are discussing more than the real issues and the real problems, and we are basing our work more than on the real knowledge of what exists and the problems that real people have to face, on things that have been written by others or houses that have been built by other architects or cities that have been planned by other planners around the world. So there is, I think, something that has become very serious and tragic that has been more and more not just a Eurocentric kind of approach to many of these issues, but a Eurocentric approach that was not at the beginning of the development of the European culture. Is a sort of Euro culture based on Euroculture, and trying to further develop ideas that are based on other ideas that have been already developed on other ideas, and that in many cases we know do not work from the very beginning, or were used for oppressing people or exploiting the resources of other countries. And I think that this applies for all the societies in which we are working, because it's true that there is, and is obviously very clear, an indigenous culture that is different from the Euro culture in some places like, I must say, Hawaii or say New Zealand or South Africa or whatever. But also there are different cultures within our own European countries or Western culture countries. And we have in some way tried to flatten them, to destroy them, and we have been unable to understand the enormous variety of problems that local communities within the same country, within the same culture, uh, have and are trying to express and are trying to solve in different ways that maybe have not so evident differences, but are using solutions that are in some way different and sometimes extremely sophisticated, even in their marginal aspects. And I think that to be unable to understand that the education and the effort we have to make in order to find solution to a general problem like the climate change that requires understanding of local problems and trying to mobilize as much as possible all the forces of population in different parts of the world in different ways, and so. And instead of using official models, official solutions, fantastic innovations, and so, is a total mistake. It's something that is the way of committing suicide. And I think that unless we are able to reappropriate of the ability of going back to real problems, to have also the sensibility to look at very simple things and try to understand why they have been done in a certain way, or some forms of life that sometimes are have very small differences, but apparently have very small differences, but instead behind that correspond to very sound basic a very sound basic variety of approaches, and so be a failure if we are not able to do something that corresponds to this need to have general answers that are based on an enormous variety of different solutions. I think that this is a crucial issue that unlikely we have been unable to take in serious consideration, and many of the catchwords we have now are again based on this idea that we shall overcome the problems and we will be able to solve all without any problem. And when we imagine, that is again from a European, I use that reference, European point of view, the difference that we have in our cities, where you have now a very rich variety of migrants arriving from different parts of the world and having different ways of living and organizing their lives and answering to the economic, social, cultural, and obviously climatic problems in the future, and we be unable to give answers that are positive to the big challenge that we have to face as a population of the world. So I think that this is something that is important to debate and discuss because it's not something that is just a sort of anthropological rediscovery of the fantastic original idea of a society in an island of the Pacific Ocean that has been preserved, or of a place in Africa that still has a fantastic tradition, is the real way of approaching the problems. There is a second aspect that I think is important, that is the involvement of the students and the communities. And that is another problem that is we are talking lots about. And in these days in Milano, there are lots of students coming, youth coming from different parts of the world. And it's a fact that we have to involve in a different positive way and active way younger people into that. What the poor Greta says is that the problem of the serious problem of climate change are not in some way affecting too much our generation or the one even of the younger people sitting around the tables or connecting with the Zoom this afternoon. But the next generation, people that now are still in the high school or in the primary schools and so, and we have to organize their connection with the reality and education and prepare them in a very different way. And the only way to prepare them in a different way is to have them relating in a much stronger way with the problems of the communities and having this interaction in between the schools, the education, the students from this point of view, and the community to which they belong. And so in some way, that is again something that has been again lost. Again, the school has become something, a sacred place where you do something that is different from the things you do at home. Or if you do that, it's okay, it can be experimental, or there are groups believing into that. But so we have lost many times, too many times, the sense of connection in between the real life of society and all the different pieces and institutions that help this society to solve a number of specific issues in different fields of life and economy and social life and policies and so on. So I think that this is a difficult but very important effort we have to make. And obviously, Ilaud is nothing. It's a very, very marginal, small boat that sails with a small in difficult waters, sails in a strange way. But the problem is to raise the issue and to work on that, to mobilize around some of this, to identify a group of key problems and try to begin to insist, to experiment some of these things that many of you are doing, trying to organize a connection in the best way, and in the best way, and to promote also new things along these lines. And from this point of view, I think that even if we are few and if we can become more, and even if we have a small boat, the boat can become a bigger one. And I think that this is in some way the task we have to try to solve in the next future. And we have, as a consequence, the task to study better some of these problems, to discuss about them, to work out on some of the ideas that came out during these days, and try to maybe to have a sort of preliminary project of network of research line and things of this kind, and then also to begin to insist with a number of international institutions and also our governmental institutions that a number of changes should be introduced in the education in some crucial areas connected with the climate change and all the transition, ecological transition that will take place in the next future. And I don't know if we can, at the end, be successful. This is something that you never know when you start an interesting project. But my impression is that we have to do this because probably working on these issues in our field that is strongly connected with the real life, with the physical aspect of the earth, with the climate, with the landscape, and so with the tangible, very strong tangible things, we can contribute to help to approach intangible things that are very important and then that sometimes are not approached because are intangible or less visible and difficult to have them emerging as important. And so I think that we have a task, we have a responsibility that is higher than the one connected only with our specific problems. We have in some way a role of, again, connecting with the movement about the environment and so, and being a part of it, to promote a real change of approach to a number of problems. And we know that the fight will be difficult because still the technology, the big technology, the big business, the solutions that are again abstract are in some way considered the ones that solve all the problems. Sorry, there is somebody that is calling me. And I suggest that in some way what we can do is to try to summarize the results of our meetings, to have the position paper circulating after further integration and discussion, and try to present some of these ideas or lines of work both to the COP26 meeting in Glasgow and to institutions like UNESCO. Our UNESCO chairs can be responsible for that, and to UN Habitat and other institutions that in some way are involved into that. But I think that at least we can do that or try to do that for some countries like Italy, also to the Ministry of Education about the need to restudy and possibly change the curricula in the schools of architecture and planning, taking care of a different way of teaching students how to deal with the problems, that in many cases to do that with a much stronger connection with communities even if this poses a number of organizational problems that are not easy at all. But at the same time, since the problems are very important, we can also imagine that we can reform the schools of architecture. The schools of architecture we have now were established in a certain moment of the history of Europe, and why they should continue forever teaching in the same way. So that is my hope, and that is my suggestion. I thank you again very much for your participation. I know that has been difficult to make all these movies and so, but we have really to have this sense of responsibility that we have the task to change things. And in some way, looking at the kids that in these days are mobilizing the cities, and they are not partisan, they are not belonging to any specific political party. Sometimes they are also very naive in some aspects, but they pose a problem that is a real one, a very serious one, and that must be solved. So thank you again, and sorry for my lamentation. I hope to see you again in Zoom, and possibly soon also in presence somewhere, because I think we should have a big meeting about these issues. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paolo. Thanks, everyone. We'll be in touch, as it was said by Paolo, so to build on the momentum. So we have done an effort, and we should actually reinforce the network and then move on. So you'll hear soon from us again. Thanks, everyone. Good night in Japan, and see you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Giulio and Paolo.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
Takashi.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a nice sleep, Takashi.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm always glad to hear from you.
Closing now. Bye.